Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. So the next thing we're discussing is called what? It's called two things. One is istishab, and one is amalu ahli al-Madina. Just a brief introduction to what this is. Istashaba yastashibu is from the word sahiba yashabu. And sahiba yashabu is to keep companionship, keep accompany something. So istishab means you keep a ruling. Whatever ruling we have, the ruling that we have, we keep that ruling. For example, like, let's say, for example, if there is no ruling to show anything contrary, you will keep that ruling in place. It's even common sense. For example, if you said, I thought there wasn't murder today, what would the first, if it's a normal weekday, and for some reason you said, oh, I thought there's no murder, sir, what would the question be regarding you? What would somebody ask you straight away immediately? Like, why? Every day is murder, sir, so why is it different today? You get what I'm saying? If it's the middle of summer, you say, oh, it's murder today. So when you ask you, well, why is it murder today? There's no murder in the summer holidays. You understand? So istishab means like general. You have a general ruling. You just don't. You have to have the evidence to change that ruling. So, for example, we've derived the general ruling that we've understood from the Quran and the Hadith is that all fruits are permissible. All foods meaning all fruits and vegetation, etc. So you don't have to find a dalil. So what's the rule? Fruits are halal. That's the general rule that's going, isn't it? Yes? So the general rule, if fruits are halal, so that's it. We stay on that one. And to say spinach is, so do we need evidence to say spinach is haram or halal? What the evidence we need for spinach and strawberry and mango and potato? You need evidence to prove it's halal or prove it's haram? We say, well, the default is what? That is halal because it's a fruit. It grows from the ground, so therefore it's halal. Now we stick to that ruling. Do you understand? Does you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So istishab means whatever the default is, the general ruling is, you stick by that unless you have evidence contrary. So for example, if for example, you say, oh, you make a claim, oh, you owe me £1,000. What's the original ruling? That I owe you money, I don't owe you money by default when I was born, when you were born? What's the default? I owed you money, I didn't owe you money. So for you to prove, what would you need to prove that I owe you money? You would need evidence, or would I need evidence? You would need evidence to say, well, no, you did buy something off me, and you do owe me £1,000. I am free. So the continuing rule is I don't owe anybody anything. To prove that you have to, so that's the general rule. Do I owe you money? Do I owe you money? I don't owe anybody money. Yes. To prove that I owe you money, then you would have to bring a new rule. So istishabul hal. It's keeping the previous condition what? That I am not in debt. And to prove that, you have to bring contrary evidence. Istishabul hal means keeping an existing ruling in place. Yes? So the original ruling is you don't owe anybody money. Original ruling regarding fruits is halal. Yes? You following? So you keep that original ruling in place until you have other evidence to prove otherwise. That's called istishabul hal. The next masala is amalu ahli al-Madina. It's called amalu ahli al-Madina. We'll discuss it tomorrow, inshallah. Okay? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. So inshallah, we will now continue discussing the concept of amalu ahli al-Madina. What does this mean? Let's look at one example here. If we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he says something, how does that information reach us? How does that information reach us? It's passed on to a Sahabi. Like the hadith that we have of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is passed on to a Sahabi, correct? Yes? How does that information from the Sahabi get passed on to the next generation? He narrates it to those after him, at-tabi'i. And then sometimes the elder tabi'i will narrate it to the younger tabi'i. And then from there goes on to the tabu tabi'i. Yes? And then each person narrates it by saying, qala, haddathana, etc. You have one person saying something. He said to us, or Rasulullah said to us. And then he says to him, he says to him, he says to him. Or her in some cases, yes? You follow me? So far so good? Understood? Make sense? Yeah, that's how knowledge passes. However, we can also have a scenario where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, let's say he done something. Let's say, for example, salah, right? He performed salah. Let me ask you a question. How many places have you got it documented that we have madrasa Monday to Friday? How many places is it documented? Written down? Or how many times have you said to somebody, I have madrasa Monday to Friday? Relatively few, isn't it? No? No? Or a lot? You say all the time, you keep on moaning about it. What do you guys do? Moan about it? You no? Because it's something that is, everybody does it. It's not really a need to explain something. It's just like, it's passed on. Like, okay, we go every Monday to Friday. It's known. It's not something you have to quote a lot or mention a lot. Or it's very well known. So similarly, if you look at the concept, let's say the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he passed away. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum performed salah the same way the Prophet told them to. They performed salah. And then they, not one Sahabi is not saying, oh, the Prophet said this. All of these companions are performing salah in the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he passed away. And they kept on performing salah the same way. Now, there's no wording involved, but they perform salah. Then they teach their children or the next generation. They're performing salah. They're doing the azan. They're giving iqamah. They are going for hajj. They're doing umrah. Yes? Are you following? So it is not necessary that they may have, it's not always necessary that is a verbal transmission. There's also something called amal, a practical transmission. You get what I'm saying? You can also have what? A practical transmission where we're transmitting the action. And it's not even words involved. It's that they taught their children how to perform salah. And now all the children are growing up performing salah in Medina, in Masjid Nabawi and in Masjid Quba, the same way that they have been performing for the last, it didn't change. It was the same thing that the Prophet, like the Prophet, they were doing it before. Do you understand? And then later on, you have a tabi'een, another tabi'i, then you have a tabu tabi'i, and Imam Malik from amongst these. And amongst these, this is in Medina Munawwara, where we have hundreds, not even like 5, but we have hundreds of people doing something. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? So Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, sometimes he would use, if the people of Medina are doing something, that's an evidence that this is the way, because like, when did it change? Obviously, it will work very strongly, because he's very early to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it worked in Medina Munawwara because many companions, many tabi'een, hundreds of sahaba, hundreds of passed away, then hundreds of tabi'een, hundreds of tabi'een, and the Imam Malik learned from the fuqaha before them. Do you understand? So even though you may not have a transmission of a word that Rasulullah said is permissible, but when everybody in Medina Munawwara is doing it, what does that show? What does that imply? That it's permissible. Like what they're all doing, had it been impermissible, no one would have done it. Yes, like, it's only been 70, it's been 90, 100 years, and this is what the practice has been. We have learned from our ulama that they said this is how you do it. So even though there may not be exact wording involved, this is a hadith, transmission of a transmission saying, oh, this is what the Prophet ﷺ did, this is what the Prophet said. And Amalu Ahl Madinah, Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, he uses this. What does he say? That sometimes this transmission of a practice, like words of adhan, when you go to the masjid, you know the words of adhan before you learn the words of adhan in the books of fiqh, because you've heard adhan so many times. Do you understand? Little boys, when they grow up, when they go to the masjid, what do they learn? They learn salah. So the finer points they learn later on, but when they go to the masjid, they start just like sitting up and down, little boys, and they start learning, and then they get mature and they perform salah. So a practice may not necessarily have to have a hadith involved. That's Imam Malik saying. So let's say, for example, is a masala, he says, people of Medina do this. So therefore, that's the sunnah, like in salah or in adhan or in iqamah or in certain things. That means it's permissible. Or this is the sunnah way. This is what everybody in Medina used to do. This is what all the fuqaha of Medina in this generation before me, this is what they told us. And they said ta'abeen than this. Do you understand? So he's looked at this, that a transmission of an action in Medina Munawwara is also a proof that this is permissible or it was haram, or the way the people of Medina dealt with it is the way we understand this hadith, this masala. Does that make sense? Do you understand how Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi looks as the people of Medina's practice as a proof, why he uses it? Yeah? Makes sense? And again, there's also lots of nuances and lots of other examples and counter arguments, etc. Just want to learn the name so that when this word comes up, you know what he's talking about. And why Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi in certain cases use this, and people have also disagreed with him, etc. But that's all in higher books. So now he's doing an introduction, baby book. Let's learn the main terms, and then later on you can study all of these things in detail, inshallah. Okay, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.